Hello, in this discussion, we'll examine how to build a dataset. We'll be doing this using Deborah Avant and AvantNeu's 2019 JCR article that builds the private security events dataset. So first we think, why build a new dataset? They're time intensive, not sure what the results will be when you start building a dataset, so there's some risk. Well, first is initial analysis. If there's no data available, you need to find some. Otherwise, we do replication and extensive, just like you would in other scientific disciplines. Why build the private security events dataset? Well, arguably, that's because what we have had is limited. It can be limited to specific continents, like Elizabeth and Sadine's piece. It could be specific countries, failed states, like Ollie's piece, or it could be like mine, where it's a specific country. Those are all very limited if we're trying to get an understanding of the general characteristics of PMFCs and their events. What's an event count? An event count measures the actions of a PMC in a conflict. So unlike some of the work that we've read that uses contracts as a measure of involvement, or employees in my case, this looks at how frequently something happens involving a PMFC, an event. So it could be the same PMFC over and over and over, but that would show more heavier involvement in that particular instance. We also can be able to disaggregate detail, meaning that you can identify much more employer-employee function related to the data when it's event count as compared to a contract. And then finally, they look at, in this case, reporting of abuses or alleged abuses, and that draws in some of the ethical and moral inquiry by coding these actions. So what was the data collection process? Event data is collected through English language news sources. It's a keyword search. So we do this and have consistently done this in the discipline. In this case, if you go to the front, it's going to be private security, private military, privatized security, privatized military. You can have all these terms, and you want to make sure you have a large swath of terms, but not so large that you get a lot of erroneous cases. They also use the World News Connection, which translates news into English. I think it's provided by the Commerce Department. Now, why is that important? Think about that for a second. Pause the video and think, why is it important to have non-English news sources help providing data for this? The reason why you want non-English news sources is obviously because these firms are operating in countries where English isn't the national language or a language of print. So we'd be missing a bunch of information if we only used English. Now, English language newspapers are dominant, and they are the source of many events data sets. So it's not wrong just to do that, but if we can do better, we should. Okay, there are also 2 human coders, at least 2 reviewers. Why? Every data point in here was evaluated, and then a human coder would double check and clean and pull all the data. But why 2? At least 2 coders. Inter-coder reliability. It's a concept where we want to ensure that the coding accuracy is as high as possible. And one way to do that is to double check it. If both coders agree after being trained, if both coders agree on what they code, then you can accept that as a higher level of reliability. If one of them has a different answer than the other, you'd have a third party come and arbitrate or determine what gets counted or what doesn't. This provides some level of confidence in the quality of the data generated. I just list here kind of the overall structure of the data process. You want the date, the place, the location. The social conflict analysis database, and this is an important paragraph in the paper, and you need to find it and just reread it. Why would having some other standard coding procedure and an event type categorization be important for this new data set? Another way to phrase that would be, why use other existing coding processes to generate this data set? Consistency and reliability are the main answers. By coding it in the same way, using the same methodologies and the same event types, the authors immediately establish that both data sets can be compatible in many ways, and they also evaluate how well the process works, because the social conflict analysis data set has had a lot of scrutiny and a lot of improvement, and we've learned this is one of the better ways to collect event count data. So think about that as it relates to replication. This slide just lists the types of data that are collected. Take a minute, think about it. There's not a whole lot we can do with it. This is what is collected. Okay, this one's just kind of exploring the data set, which you do as you read through it. Aggregate reporting. So this is just the total number of reports that they find. And as you can see, it increases over time. It looks like a stock chart, right? Stocks typically start in the lower left-hand side, and over long periods of time, they move higher towards the upper right. That's what we see here. We can't get a lot of other effect here other than it's trending upward. Notably, after 2001 or 2003, there aren't enormous spikes in private security contracting, and they're globally. And you say, well, why is that? What about Iraq, Afghanistan? Remember the data set. It doesn't include the Middle East. So this only includes 3 regions of the world, not including the Middle East. It's still a great data set and very helpful in thinking and doing analysis. It's the best data set out there, actually, that I've seen. But you can only, when you're building a data set, you want to publish and you want to get things out and let other scholars start working on it once you have a reasonable amount. So other parts of the world and other time periods will be added as we move. So that might be why there's not a giant spike in the overall data. Data analysis here, when we think about Africa, Latin America, and Southeast Asia, these are the services that are provided, or not the services, these are the event types associated with the actions. So they have crime, plot, riot, strikes, violence, routine work. And what you can see here is that there's a lot of routine work and a lot of violence. And that different regions experience PMFCs differently. And this is an important point, as early in the scholarship, phenomena was generally treated as a global market or global effect. And we've learned since then, as we've studied, that the regional markets for private security are very influential and important to think through. Okay, this is your first discussion board from this section. I want you to answer why replicate Elizabeth and Sadine, and I say that because I can't say their names very well, and I'm kind of embarrassed by that. So they're both incredible scholars and really, really nice. So we'll just leave it at that. What purpose does the replication serve in the scientific method, and what do the results suggest? Okay, so answer that. So why do we have to do this? Why do replication? And then identify where it fits within the scientific method. Identify clearly what results are similar and which findings are different. And then what are the implications of the difference in findings? Okay, both of those answers, the 2 subpoints, the authors clearly define. They clearly say it. They tell you what to answer in those. So I'm really asking you what the important part is of replication, but I want you to find in the literature, in the article, the answer to those 2 questions. Think about the results. I'm just pointing this out here because I haven't spent probably as much time walking through tables and figures and what's important. This chart is interesting because they actually include the control variables on top. GDP, ethnic fractionalization, ethnic war, mountainous terrain, polity, proportion of forces. Those are all controls. The next things to keep in mind are the ones where the comparative between the 2 data sets or amongst the data sets are going to start to occur. Okay, so it's a quick one. Think about the events. What are the implications for future research? You need to think through and be able to articulate the importance of replication and extension. And then you need to be able to identify but think through what the future of PMFCs hold. Given the data set that you've seen and the trends that you've seen, what would we expect for the future? Thanks. Hope you enjoyed it.